Hello, everyone, and welcome back. So, this video is for week 4, and what we're going to talk about this week is the outline that you will be using for all of the speeches that we'll give in this class, at least the major ones. So, that's your informative and then 2 persuasives, as well as the evaluation form that goes along with the outline. And what I'll do is show you how those two things are sort of made to complement each other. In other words, if you do the outline properly, you will be rewarded basically on the evaluation form. So, real quick, let me go ahead and open up not SPSS, but a Zoom window so that we can see each other. What a great headshot, right? There we are. Okay. Let me shrink myself and we'll come over here. Now, with week 4, the thing that is due this week is going to be a video of you presenting your topic and sources, as well as completing your virtual speech lab tour. So, if you've not done your tour yet, remember that's due by Friday of the 4th week here by midnight. Now, we close on Fridays at 1 p.m. So, really, that will be your last chance to get in the tour. Again, go to gvsu.edu/speechlab, and from there you will see schedule a consultation or drop in for a consultation. It's really best if you schedule one. That way you know that you'll get a consultant when you want them, and do that sooner rather than later. It'll take you 15 minutes tops, and it's part of your grade, and it will help you understand what to do in the future. Now, as for the other assignment that's due this week, just so we're clear on that as well, if you go through your course pack, which I will here, you'll find this worksheet. And this is what you're going to present to us, okay? It's 2 pages on page 23 and 24. And you're going to tell us, okay, here is the topic that I picked and why. Remember, make sure that it fits our criteria that we discussed. You can look up in the previous chapter or review last week's video for those requirements. Then you're going to tell us what that is, how you may discuss it informatively, how you might talk about it persuasively, and most important to me is why is it relevant to your audience, right? You'll need to come up with a couple reasons why your audience cares about this. And as a reminder, if you talk about something that is generally important, maybe it is high school curriculum. Well, that's important for us overall as a country, but it's not very relevant to this specific audience because they've already finished high school. All right, so there are other examples, but make sure that yours is inside that framework. Now, if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to run your topic by me, send me an email and I'll be happy to tell you what I think about your topic and if it will work or if maybe you should keep doing a little bit more work to find something that's a little more appropriate. Either way, I'm fine with that. But for the video for week 4, tell us what your topic is and then answer these questions. Then you're going to find 3 sources. The details on that are up in the assignment details section of the syllabus part. And you're going to have 1 peer review journal article, you're going to have 1 news source that's credible, and then you're going to just have a statistic that's from a credible source. Again, we talked about what those might look like last week, but you'll again want to enter that here. Tell us why it's credible, how you plan to use it, maybe a specific part of it that you plan to use. But that's what you're going to do. There's no need to find more than 3 for now. Just follow the directions in the assignment and you should be fine. Now, what we're going to do this week, as I said, is look at the outline and the evaluation form. The outline is something that I made for this class, and we don't just use it because I made it and I think, oh, it's great. I mean, it's very effective, but it also works well for the types of speeches that we will give in here, where we're focused mostly on clarity. So many people want to do their own thing and go their own direction and infuse their own style, and I get that. And there will be a time for you to do that, but not here. I consider this course, since it's an introduction to public speaking, a lot like a driver's ed course. In driver's ed, everyone follows the same rules, they drive the same path, everything's very standardized. And that's what we're going to do here. And this outline helps us do that. Later on, you can go the back way, you can go the fast way, you can take the interstate, you can take back roads, whatever you like to do. But for now, we're going to stay together and we're going to use this outline to help us do that. What you'll see in the pack is a blank outline. Now, this you can use for your actual outlines that you will use in the course. So you could copy and paste this if you want to and type into that. That way you don't need to go and create a whole new outline that looks similar to this. You can use the exact one. That's what I want you to do. Next, you'll see an outline with red text, and that is the explanation of each item on the outline. And then last, you will see a copy of the evaluation form that I will use when I grade you. So what I'm going to do today is start here, and let me zoom in a little so that we can all see, and walk you through the outline and what each item means on here. So let's start at the top. First thing, like literally very first, notice here, introduction, start speaking here. The name, topic, and purpose, that's just for record keeping of the paper. For you as a speaker, you'll start speaking right here with the attention getter. Notice something for me before we discuss attention getters in detail. Notice that the introduction of yourself, where you say, "Hi, my name is after the attention getter. Don't start out with, "Hi, my name is, and today I'm going to talk about." That runs the risk of alienating some audience members. And it may not be any fault of yours besides simply stating your name and topic. Feel me on this. So, let's say that, well, you don't have to have some strange, elaborate name. You could be like me, Carl, right? Carl. Simple name. But if I said first, "Hi, my name's Carl, and today I'm going to talk about whatever," as soon as I say my name, some people may start thinking about who else they know that's named Carl, or who they've seen in, popular culture named Carl. And I can tell you, as somebody with this name, they're probably going to think of the kid from The Walking Dead, or the llamas that kill people, or maybe the greenskeeper from Caddyshack, or maybe the special needs murderer from Sling Blade. That's Carl's, right? Maybe Carl Winslow from the Steve Urkel, Family Values would be Family Matters would be my best bet. But those aren't great options. And so just simply throwing some basic information out there could throw your audience off, and you don't want to distract. So start with a hook, and that is your attention getter. You see it here. Attention getter should be the first words that you say. And I like when you use certain types of attention getters, and you see some examples here. Stories are great. Now, we'll come back to the idea of using a story for the persuasive speeches. That's where these work the best, in my opinion. And I'll give you examples of actual speeches that I have seen or heard where people use stories brilliantly. They'll start a story, get to a cliffhanger moment, stop the story, and then finish their speech. And then at the very end of the whole presentation, they'll come and finish the story. And it makes you as an audience listen, because you want to know the resolution. You want to know how the story ends. But for us, what we're going to focus on for the informative speech are the other options here. So you definitely can hold off on those stories, but think about what else you might use. And you can see those here, some examples of those. So the first one is a shocking statistic, or maybe a shocking fact. So with this one that I use sort of frequently as an example is to tell you that are watching this video right now that 1 in 4 of you have an STD. I know it's shocking, but it's true. Now, you may know that as a college student, your risk is higher than other people. We can look at COVID and talk about disease spread and how that works. But the idea here is that many people may know they're at an increased risk, but not that 1 in 4 is the fact. So many of those folks are asymptomatic, so they won't ever know that they have this unless they have some serious problem with it. So for this one, you may leave it there and see the faces start to crinkle a little bit and wonder if it's them. You might go a step further and say, look to your left, look to the right, look below you or beside or in front of, depending on if you're talking to a virtual screen full of people or a live classroom. Then ask yourself, is it you or is it them? Or what I've done in the past, even you can start counting one, two, three, uh-oh, and go around the room that way. I mean, it seems a little over the top, and it can be, but the idea here is that you're grabbing the attention. If you don't get it early, it's really almost impossible to get it later. So grab it early. Now, again, shocking stats or facts, that's one way to do this. Another option would be a use of a question. But notice here, a rhetorical or show of hands question, and don't ask for verbal responses. Okay? So, with that one, if you wanted to just get the gears turning and get people to think a little bit, you might ask a rhetorical question. And so, if you were told today that you have an STD, how would you react? Would you want to know which kind it was? Would you want to know what the prognosis is? Would you want to know the treatments for it? You don't want a real answer. You just want people to start thinking about a situation. That can sometimes be enough in order to get the audience connected with you so that you can move forward. It really depends on the topic. If not, you could do a show of hands question, which is where you actually want a response, but you want it to be just hands going up. So you'll say, raise your hand if, and then you would give a scenario that may or may not apply to people. We'll come back in a few minutes to this, but let me just insert it now by saying, with these examples of STDs that we've done the last two times, don't go with the show of hands question if you're talking about a topic like that. You're not going to get an honest response. You're going to put people sort of on the spot, make them uncomfortable, and that's not good for anyone. So if your topic is appropriate, and most are, you could do show of hands questions. Don't just do one or two or even three, because that will get your audience thinking and physically interacting. I know it's just raising a hand, but that level of interaction does cause them usually to buy in more to what they're doing, and that is at that moment listening to you. Okay? You don't want to ask a verbal response question where you get someone to say something, excuse me, because you don't know what their response will be, and it may fit perfectly with what you need, or it could just throw everything off. So, if you're talking about, I don't know, going on vacation, and you ask, who here's been on vacation? Raise your hand. Okay, here's a hand that goes up. And then you point to someone and say, tell me about your favorite vacation. You might have someone that gives you a nice, succinct answer. My family and I went to, I don't know, Mackinac Island as a kid, and I still remember having fun eating fudge. It was great. Fine, that works. What if you point to someone and say, tell me about your favorite vacation? And they are, hesitant to speak, or they don't have a clear example in their head. They may just go silent, and then it creates this awkward feel for the entirety of your presentation. Or what you might encounter is that you call on someone and they want to tell you a long, involved story. God help us if it's sort of a depressing story where it's sort of, well, I remember my favorite vacation was 2015. It was just before the car accident that changed everything. We were going up north, and right, how are you going to stop that person when they're spilling their guts to you in front of a class and not come across as the bad guy, and still get the audience on your side for your speech? All right, so don't do that. Now, some people will try to do sort of a canned response or put a plant in the audience, right? So they get with a person before and say, I'm going to ask this question and call on you. I want you to answer it. That's not necessary. That's not needed. In fact, it's going to be difficult to do in most situations. And so it's best if you can learn other ways, which we're talking about now, of grabbing the attention. The last example here on attention getters is humor. And there are a couple caveats to this. First of all, make sure that your topic is open to being humorous. If you have any doubt that your topic can sort of be laughed about, not necessarily at, but about, don't use humor, right? So I've literally had a guy before who gave a speech on breast cancer, and his attention getter was one tumor said to the other, that kind of joke. It was really uncomfortable for the room. There was this awkward, not even silence, but sort of gasp that was collective. And you don't want to go and use humor where it's not going to fit. Another thing, maybe your topic fits that criteria. You say, oh, no, this can be laughed about. It's okay. And trust me, I think most things in life can be laughed about. So I'm on your side there. But you have to ask yourself also, are you funny? If you're not funny, don't try to use humor as an attention getter. It's not going to go well. How do you know if you're funny? Has anyone ever told you that you're funny? If they haven't, I'm sorry, you're not funny. Can you tell a joke and get people to laugh? I hope, but if you can't, you're not funny. Or do they only laugh at you and not with your joke? These are honest questions you have to ask yourself. It's not the end of the world. You can still be a very effective speaker without being humorous, but don't try to sort of go outside the lane and use something that's not a strength, right? Find what you are the best at and do that for this attention getter. My advice to you is to come up with an example of each of these that fits with your speech and then run it. Try it. Bring it to the speech lab virtually and have a consultant give you their feedback. Do it with friends. This sort of thing will give you that sense of how it's going to be received. And if there's a doubt that it will be received well, try something different. You've got plenty of time in order to put this together if you start now. Okay. Once you get the attention of the audience, that is when you can now introduce yourself and your topic. And you can say it as simply as this. Hi, my name is, and today I want to tell you about. That's it, right? Insert your name, insert your topic. Don't overthink this. Please, as we go through this outline, it's fairly detailed because it doesn't need to be sort of processed and changed and altered and it doesn't require you to create something completely new. If you follow the outline, you will find that you've got a fairly thorough and complete speech. The next thing here is the statement of purpose. What that does is it gives your audience a listening goal, something that they should be able to agree happened at the end of a presentation. You can tell them, I like to hear these words, by the way, when they are in quotation marks. By the end of this speech, you should what? What do you want them to get out of this? If it's informative, that you want them to learn more, you should know more about, you should be able to tell the difference between, you should feel informed about, those sorts of things. If it's persuasive, which is different, remember we talked about that last week as well, it would be by the end of this, you should feel, you should believe, you ought to go, you should fight against, these sorts of things, right? You're going to take a position and try to get us to agree with that position. But remember, your first big speech is informative. So only educating, trying to stay away from persuasion as much as humanly possible. But the next two speeches will be persuasive and you can go right for it. I mean, tell us how you really feel. So give them a clear listening goal in the form of a purpose statement. Then give them a thesis statement or a central idea. This is not different. Repeat, not different from what you've learned in English classes most of your life, where you've sort of got this one sentence summary that wraps up the entirety of a larger work, in this case your speech, in a single concise sentence. With this one, you can see some ideas here that it should not contain a list. It should not be a list of main points. We're going to get to that in the preview of main points in just a few minutes. But for this, just think about what you could say that really catches the essence of your speech. Now, 2 tips on this. First, always do this dead last. Do everything else first, then come back to the thesis statement. It's really difficult to summarize at this point a speech that's yet to be written. I mean, if you're in the introduction, you haven't created the speech to summarize it yet. So do it at the end. The other tip is if you want to get some examples of what this might look like, go to imdb.com, the movie database, and look up your favorite movie, right? From there, you're going to see that every movie listed has some level of a thesis statement. So let me pull this up here, and we'll go to imdb.com. And let's move me over just a bit. I think a movie most of us, if not all of us, have seen. Let's do Finding Nemo. When we do that, we can click on the 2003 version. And here you go. Each one of these will have a thesis statement or a one sentence summary. And here it is for Nemo. After his son is captured in the Great Barrier Reef and taken to Sydney, a timid clownfish sets out on a journey to bring him home. Now, notice what's missing. They didn't talk about Dory. They didn't talk about really Nemo's adventure. They didn't talk about the sharks. They didn't talk about the little girl in the dentist's office. They just gave us the very basic overview summary of what this movie is about. They caught the essence but left out all the details. And that's what you should also do when you're thinking about your thesis statement. If you gave us all the details right away, you would sort of ruin it for us. We don't need to know how the movie ends before we ever decide if we want to watch it or not. You can see other examples. Put in your favorite movie there, and you'll find those. Or if you have cable, go to a movie that's on TV and then click info and read the info about it. That's the same thing. Somebody actually gets paid pretty well to write these. So you can do this, but do it last and think of it as a summary that's not a list. Okay, that's very, very important. All right, the next item, still in the introduction, of course, is the relevance, or answering the question, why do we, the audience, care about this topic? This isn't why you care about this topic, although it can be. If you care about it for the same reason we should care about it, tell us that. But if you care about it because it's your major, or you've had a very specific event in your life that made you care about it, but the rest of us don't share that, you probably want to come up with something else, maybe a different topic, because you want to make the audience connect here. Give them a reason to listen. So, putting it together, the statement of purpose is the listening goal. By the end of this, you should know more about, let's say it's STDs in college students. Thesis statement, let's say that's STDs in college students have a negative relationship that can be life-changing. Okay, fair enough. Why do you care about this? Well, because, just put it together. Don't overthink it, remember? Because you are a college student, and that's who we're talking about here. And because those negative impacts on the rest of your life are something you want to avoid. It's that simple. Now, sometimes you may find that you need to think outside the box, or be a little more creative with the relevance, and say you should care about this topic because that could be a tougher question or tougher statement to finish. If that's the case, consider changing a topic. That's one that you might ask yourself. We do that early on in the assignment that's due this week, right? It's the very last question or the last column on the topic side of the worksheet. Why do we care about your topic? Most of the time, good news, most of the time, there are reasons why the rest of us care about something that you care about. And your job as the speaker is simply to find those. And again, this is something that may take a little time, but don't forget, the Speech Lab's here to help. I'm here to help, and you're going to make this work usually. Okay, last big chunk of the introduction is the preview of main points. Here, you're going to give us 3 main points because you will give us in your speech in the body, the next section, 3 main points. Remember, not 2, not 4, 3. 3, 3, 3. There's a reason for that. Most human brains can remember 3 things at a time. And when something else comes in, it can often knock out either the first thing that went in or the least important thing, as our brain determines, that went in. We don't want to overload people. But we want a little more complexity than simply 2 main points. So have 3. Now, we'll talk about how to divide up your main points in a little bit, but for now, realize that you're going to sound repetitive. And for new speakers, that's often sort of off putting. It feels strange because if you'll notice on the outline, preview the main points 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3. Don't use 4. That made sense, Carl. Then you've got the body, main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. Then, if you needed it again, the review of main points 1, 2, 3. There is a saying in sort of speech world that goes like this: good speakers will tell you what they're going to tell you, and then tell you what they told you. This is one of the things that separates written communication from spoken communication. In a written form, you could always, as the reader, flip back and review if you forgot what something said or what it meant or what had already been discussed. In a speech, you can't do that. You can't really, effectively stop the speaker every time you get a little confused. So the speaker's job then is to keep us as a group on track. And an easy way for them to do that is to tell us what we're about to hear, tell it to us, and then remind us of what we were just told. Again, it sounds like overkill. And it is repetitious for sure, but it's a good clarifying tool to use for your audience. It will be appreciated. All right, the very last thing in the intro is a transition. With the transitions, you'll notice next on the evaluation form, I'll listen for those carefully. It's vital that you have them. And here, all you need to say is a signal, right? To begin, for starters, to jump into things, let's get going with. Whatever you want to do is fine, as long as it's clear that you are moving out of the introduction and into the body of your presentation. All right, so give us that clear signal and then move on down. This is where you get to those main points. So you should, again, always have 3 main points. In terms of the internal divisions, here you'll see A, B, C in parentheses. The idea is that you will definitely have an A and a B at minimum, okay? If you wanted to have a C, you could go all the way to Z or triple A. It doesn't matter really to me. What matters is that you are thoroughly explaining a topic or an idea in the allotted amount of time. So I have seen people that always just use an A and a B and they do a fine job. I've also seen people that go way down the alphabet when they are going through these divisions, but they just have tiny pieces of information for each one, and they do a fine job. That's something that you need to play with, try out, rehearse as a speaker, and see what works best for you. I will tell you that you can bring this outline up with you to give your speech. We'll talk about ways to fold it and ideas that will help you make it work best. But the nutshell version of that is, don't have so much text on here that you will be tempted to read it, because you likely will, but also don't have too little text on here so that you'll forget what you meant and get lost. Both of those are bad looks for a speaker. And you want to find that sort of Goldilocks middle of the road zone where you're able to make eye contact, speak to the audience instead of reading, but also keep up with where you're supposed to go next and not lose your track and your train of thought. So back to the main points, definitely always have an A and a B. If you want more, you can. You could even do subdivisions, right? So you could have like A, A1, A2, B, B1, B2. Again, whatever works best for you there, play with that. The other thing that I want to point out, 2 other things actually. You'll see evidence and supporting material cite as you go on each one of these main points. This is a spot for you to put the sources that you're going to cite for this main point. Again, if you use this form for your actual speaking notes, which is fine, you might list out the sources in the order that they're cited. I like to color code mine and then go back up and color code it in the text of the points up here. And that way I know which source to cite and when. So insert that here. And if nothing else, even if you use another form for your notes, it'll help you still stay organized with what sources go with what information. The second thing here is to look at the transitions and internal reviews that are between main points 1 and 2 and between main points 2 and 3. Now, we've already had our first transition between the body, the introduction and the body. To begin, let's talk about whatever that first thing was. Then, between main point 2 and 3, instead of just saying next or second or whatever it might be, say now that we've done my first main point, but give it a name, we can move on to my second main point. And again, give that a name. So here's an example. Now that you know more about apples, let's move on and talk about bananas. And then later on, actually that would be here. Now that you know more about apples, let's move on to why oranges are also important. And then now that you know more about apples and oranges, let's finish up by talking about bananas. So it's a bridge, it's a connector. It doesn't just move forward, but it reminds us, here's what we just talked about. And so now let's build on that and go to the next topic. The important thing, and the last thing I'll say with the body here, is for this transition between points 2 and 3, notice that we're not just going back to 2. We're not saying, now that you know more about oranges, let's finish up with bananas. We're going back to the first main point. And since there's only 3, you'll want to do this all the time. Everything that you've covered up until this point, go ahead and remind us what that was. So now that you know more about apples and oranges, let's finish up by talking about bananas. Again, it's just a bridge that gets you from where we just were to where we are about to be. It connects the past and the future here in the present. Okay, the next chunk of a speech, the last chunk, is the conclusion. The thing that I like about, this outline style, but generally speaking about intros and conclusions, is that they are part of the same whole. And what I mean by that is, if you think about sort of a continuance or a mirror, this is a mirror of your introduction. So what you'll notice is that you have the statement of purpose. We had that in the intro. We said, by the end of this speech, you should. Now we're just phrasing it a little different. After hearing this speech, you should. And then we're going to copy and paste what we had above. Here's that thesis or central idea. We had that above. So when we get ready to write out our thesis and we find something that we really are happy with, we'll put it in both places. But down here, you could just be as simple as adding the word clearly to the beginning, or as you can now see, and then give the same thesis that you put above by itself. Right? Work smart, not hard here. Finally, or next to last rather, the review of main points, you're going to simply relist your main points. So for the example we just saw, it would be apples, oranges, and bananas. And then last is the closure. This is so important because you have all been an audience member in a presentation, whether it's a classroom or a job or maybe even like a preacher or something religious, where someone finishes a presentation and no one's positive if they're done or not, right? I can tell you as a longtime speech teacher, I can't tell you how often I see myself wanting to clap and looking around the room like, what do you think, everybody? A few times I've gone ahead and started and then they continued, and it's kind of embarrassing, not just for me, but for them. So don't find yourself in that position. Let the audience know that you're done with your speech. You've reached the end and it's concluded by using a strong piece of closure. What you want to do here is go right back up to your attention getter. Whatever you did there, do it again here. What that's called, and you see it on the screen, is ring structure. This goes back to the ancient Greeks. A guy named Isocrates came up with this, but it's where we get the expression coming full circle. It's finishing back where we began, and that lets the audience feel as though we've gone on this trip and now we've returned home. And so, if it is a shocking statistic, you may say something like, so at the beginning I told you 1 in 4 of you have an STD. But there's good news. That means 3 out of 4 of you do not. So, and then you can tell them either they should know more or that they should go get tested and give them what's known as a call to action. We'll talk about that when we get to persuasion, but for now, we're just going to end on closure. If it was a joke that you told, tell it again, but remember now we're going to think of it a little differently and tell us how we should think of it differently. If it was a question, ask it again, but now with the new information that you have provided, does the answer change? So, again, this outline is designed to make your life as simple as possible while still giving an extremely effective speech. It's divided into your 3 main parts: intro, body, conclusion. Each one of those has a very finite set of requirements, these items that are listed. And on this form with the red print, you'll be able to see what those are if you forget. You can always go back and watch this video and also use the sheet. So the next thing here, and it goes right along, is to talk about your evaluation form. This is the sheet that I will have in front of me as I'm grading your speech. I know in this course we are completely online, and so I will have the ability to go back and watch your speech multiple times if I wanted to. I don't, and it's not because I don't care to watch it more than once because it's not very good. That's not what I'm saying. I am of the opinion that in a live situation, if this was the workplace or a community event, whatever, you only get one shot at the audience understanding you. And so I will always grade your speech the first time I watch it. Trust me, I've trained hard on this. I've made this form. It's easy for me to follow, to skip around if needed. And this is what I will use, and I'll watch it through the first time while I grade it. There might be a time where I'll pause it if I'm making a big note, but generally I'll just watch it, grade, and move on. And again, that's to simulate how an audience will receive your message. Now, let's talk about what all is in the evaluation form and how you can get the maximum amount of points. Okay? First things first, across the top, just your name, the purpose, whether it's informative or persuasive, and then the date when either I grade it or you submit it. Then you'll see 8 items over here on the right. Well, actually throughout, but over here on the right, you've got the grade scale, which goes from poor to fair to good to very good and then excellent. Your speech, as you'll notice down here, is worth 32 possible points. Now, that's not on your final grade. Speeches are worth things like 15 or 25 points. There's some math that's involved, but what you'll need to know is that there are 8 items in a possible 32 points, which means each item on excellent is worth 4 points. Each item on very good is worth 3. Each item on good is 2. Fair is 1, and poor is 0. So if you want to think of it another way, a lot of folks think of it like A, B, C, D, F. It's up to you on how your brain understands this the most. I like the numbers. That way I can show you sort of how I arrived at your grade. It's not just on a whim. I know many speech teachers that will say things like, well, it felt like a C speech. I don't find that very useful. It's not easy to defend, first of all. And second, it doesn't give you the type of feedback that you need to improve. Here I can show you the area where you maybe succeeded the most or struggled the most, and then you'll know what to work on for the next speech. So now that you know the scale over here, let's look at the items. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I think I mentioned this anyway. Maybe I was talking to one of you actually in a meeting earlier, but I like to consider a speech as half coming from the organization and half coming from the delivery. I guess that organization and content would be half. So the first half of this evaluation form is that it is, were you prepared? Did you make a clear outline? Did you think this through? Have you practiced? Does it logically make sense? And then the second half is much more heavy on delivery. How did you give us this message? So let's look at this. Item 1, Did you select and narrow a topic appropriately for the audience and occasion with a clear central idea, aka thesis statement, and specific purpose statement? If you followed the outline, you did that. You've already answered, well, at least by the end of this week, you'll answer what your topic is and why you care about it, maybe sort of how you're going to discuss it. That's narrowing it. And if you follow the outline, you will have a clear thesis and a clear statement of purpose. Great. No problems there. Everybody should get excellent. Second, was the organization clear and logical? And did you follow that outline? Now, what you'll see here is shorthand for everything, for the most part, that's on that outline. Attention getter, statement of purpose, thesis statement, relevance. These 1, 2, and 3, this is your preview of main points. T1 through 3 are transitions. So again, body, intro to body, main point 1 to 2, main point 2 to 3. Then in the conclusion, statement of purpose, thesis, review main points, closure, and then if needed, a call to action. So that's if you are, again, giving a persuasive speech only. If you follow the outline and go through it in the right order, this will all fall into place. So you should be okay there. Third, provides appropriate supporting material, number and types of sources with clear citation, including publication and date. So important there. This is where you are going to get credit for your sources. Remember, you have to cite sources orally during your speeches for this course. There are details on the number of sources required for each speech and the type of sources required for each speech in the syllabus. But this is where I'll keep up with those. And as you cite them, I'll write them down as I understand them from you. So be sure that you're citing things as clear as possible and always including the publication, so the Journal of Stuff or CNN.com or Pew Research, Gallup poll, whatever it is. And the date, not that you found it, but the date that the piece that you're using was published there. If you can't find a date, you may want to look for a different source. There are some exceptions. You know, if there's a study that talks about the statistics for a certain group in 2017, it's right, you're going to say 2017. But generally speaking, you'll see a clear publication and a clear date. Okay, number 4, and this is where we start to blend in to delivery, uses language that is appropriate to the audience and occasion. That's talking about style and jargon, and avoids vocal fillers. So the first part of this, appropriate to language for the audience and occasion, that's preparation. If you plan out what you're going to say, you should have pretty appropriate language use, right? So by appropriate, don't use, just every other word as slang or, go through and use derogatory language throughout the entire presentation. There's a time and place for everything, but not usually in an inappropriate amount or way. The other idea here is that you'll want to have a conversational speaking style. Go back and look at persuasion and the delivery of it. Excuse me. I'm sorry, not persuasion, but let's go back up here and find it real quick. Yeah, chapter 4. Here we go. Actually, it's probably going to be easiest if you look really, I guess as a whole. We talk about using a conversational style. Let's find exactly where that's at. Well, it comes up later in this document. But then we'll talk more about it later. So I guess the thing to take away for now is don't be too uptight or proper. Don't sound like you're talking to a royal, but also don't sound like, excuse me, it's got a tickle. It's not COVID. Don't sound like you're talking to your best friend at a bar either. Find again that middle ground that is conversational. What's expected in a normal conversation? And give us that. Jargon refers to specialized language of a particular field. So, like, the medical field has its own jargon. Every subject at this university has its own jargon, all the way to, truck drivers, prisoners, military, you name it. It's almost like a slang. It's a little different. But don't overwhelm us with the use of jargon. There'll be a time for that. So, as I mentioned earlier in this video, we're focused here in this class on being as clear as possible. Jargon doesn't allow that to happen necessarily. If you were talking to a group of experts on your topic or in the field around your topic, use jargon. That shows them that you know what the language they use and that you're part of that in group. But for a mixed group like us, stay away from it and substitute, if possible, words that are more readily understandable. Now, if there is no substitute word and you have to use a piece of jargon, go ahead and do that, but explain briefly what it might mean. So, for example, in the medical field, if you talk about a stent is something they put in your artery or your vein that holds it open so blood can flow through a little easier if you've got like a clot or something. You may say something about the doctor's inserted a stent, then add in a stent is a small piece of medical equipment that expands an artery or a vein so that blood can flow freely. And then just move right on, right? We don't need to get into the history of stents and any other details, just a quick, easy to visualize definition. The last part of number 4 here is to avoid vocal fillers. And this is where we begin to move over to delivery. Vocal fillers are what I just did with that. They're ums, uhs, likes, you knows, you know what I mean? And at the beginning of sentences. These things are, first of all, very normal, but can be distracting. Hear me on this. For these vocal fillers or vocalized pauses, what your brain wants to do is to just simply pause and think or retrieve information for what it's about to do next. It wants to process something. And because of your motion of speaking, that you're sort of in the zone, you are in the action of speaking, it's hard for your brain to then turn off your voice completely and let it have that quiet moment it needs. So it fills it with things like and those sorts of sounds. We all know that we do these things. Some of us don't realize that we do them as often as we do. So here's what you need to know. Again, first, that they're normal. Second, that it's okay to have them. But third, that you don't want to have them to the point where they're distraction. If I hear so many that I start to get distracted, what I will do is write down a timestamp. So, like, 2 minutes and 30 seconds or wherever you are in the speech, and then I'll count them for you just for 1 minute to show you how many times you used it in a single minute, because you may not be aware. You should be, though, because what I want you to do is, as you practice with a recording and see how it looks, see how it sounds. Go back and watch it multiple times for different things each time. And one of those should be counting your vocal fillers. Again, it's okay to have some. It's normal. We all do. But try not to let them overtake the attention of the audience so that they are only counting in their minds now how many times you use one. Okay, the 5th item uses variety or a conversational style. Again, we just discussed that. In pitch, rate, and pause to maintain interest. So with this one, rate is pretty self-explanatory. We want to find that happy medium where you're not crawling through a speech, but you're also not running through it either. You're not making a sprint. Generally, what happens when people get nervous is they speak too quickly. And if that's the case, again, that's normal, but try practicing at a slower rate and get yourself comfortable with that slower rate. Then, if you start to speak in the live speech or the final recording and you get nervous and kick it up a notch, Well, if you go from below normal to one step up, you're just where you need to be at normal. But if you start at normal and go one step up, you're at fast, right? So try that, play with that, see what you think. But it's normal to go a little quick. Just get it under control. You might write notes to yourself on your speaking notes to slow down, breathe, stop here, so that you can remember to do this. Similarly, your pitch should change in a natural way. I mentioned this, I think, in another video, but if you are giving someone great news, your voice rate and pitch go up, right? Oh my God, you just won $1 million. But if you're giving them bad news, everything shifts down. Like, hey, yeah, you didn't get the job. And so think of how we naturally do that all the time, every day, and then do it in the speech. So many people forget that. They sort of disconnect from being human and move into robot speaker mode. And that takes away that conversational style and ability to connect with your audience. So use things like rate, pitch, pause in just a moment to make that human connection. Of these, pause may be the most important in terms of making the connection with the audience, because that allows time for the audience to process information. Just as you need to have some pauses here and there to process what you're doing in the act of speaking, the audience needs that as well. Now, first of all, don't forget periods mean pause at the end of sentences, right? Some folks get in the zone and they get maybe a little fired up and they run over periods just like speed bumps. I mean, they don't slow them down at all. Avoid that. Also, with pauses, don't forget that you can take these to let something sink in. Give them, some information and then pause just to let it sink in a little bit. So 1 in 4 of you has an STD right now. 1 in 4. But that pause in between lets that start to simmer in the pot a little bit, to start to move around in their head. So don't forget that. Also, though, you can put a pause in as a plan in order to build drama or draw attention. And what I mean is, if you wanted someone to really focus on something specific that you're saying, tell them that it's very important. First of all, identify it. Say, this is the most important thing I'll say today, and then deliver it with pauses between each word. Now, that might feel awkward, but it can be very effective. I mean, that sort of delivery style has the ability to take something that most of us think is not important information and make it sound important. So, if I were going to tell you that chickens are birds that can't fly, right? That's what chickens are. They're birds that can't fly. But if I said it in a very deliberate way, it could cause drama in a different way. Think about it. Chickens are birds, but they can't fly. They can't fly. How would that feel? A bird that can't fly. Folks, we have to do something about this. I mean, again, who cares, right? Of course, there are birds that can't fly. But with that delivery, that punch, really lets the audience know that you want them to zoom in, if you will, on what you're saying. Number 6, clear pronunciation, correct grammar, articulation, and adequate volume. Let's work backwards on this one. Adequate volume is just what it sounds like. There's no need to scream at us, but please make sure that the microphone is picking you up on the recording device. If I can't hear something, I can't grade it, so I can't give credit for it. It may say on your evaluation form, like, you didn't have a closure or a thesis statement. You're like, no, I did. Here it is. But when we watch the video, it's not audible. You can't make it out clearly. It is what it is at that point. So make sure that you're speaking up enough to be heard clearly by your audience, but you don't need to yell. Similarly, quality articulation is important. That doesn't mean that I want you to go around and, hello, everyone. today we are. No, please don't. That's just annoying as hell. But make sure that you're not dropping letters off of words, that you're not sort of stringing words together. I'm from the South, and we do that a lot. There's a whole comedy thing about it from the Jeff Foxworthy, You Might Be a Redneck Guy, where he talks about things that we'll say in the South, words that are not real, but they're a combination of other words. So things like mayonnaise, like mayonnaise, a lot of people here, or G-chat, right? Did you eat yet? No, you want to? No, do you want to? Right? So again, we all do these sorts of things. We all do them differently. We all have examples depending on where we're from and how we speak, but try to clean it up just enough to make sure that your audience can follow you in a speech setting. You've got grammar. That's next here. I'm not the grammar police. I don't go and just listen for small errors, but I'll go ahead and tell you this. Take heed. The thing that I will mark down and listen for because it sounds so wrong to me is a disagreement with plural. So when people will say things like, my main points is, instead of are, points, it's going away, right? I'm taking points off. The reason I do that is because I don't want you to do that when you get out and go somewhere else. I mean, God, can you imagine that you're in a job interview where you have to give presentation? All the job interviews I've ever had for academia include that, or multiple presentations. But you give a presentation and it's between you and one other person and you're very equally qualified. But boy, you said points is. And that's the difference, maybe. Who knows? But it could be. And we don't want that. We don't want you to lose out because of a simple error. So we'll be sure to clean that up. Last on number 6 is pronunciation. This doesn't mean articulation. This doesn't mean dialect. So tomato, potato, that kind of stuff. I make fun of my wife. We're both from the South, and like I say orange, and the color in the fruit, she says orange. That's pronunciation in terms of dialect. What I'm worried about is you saying a word that is meant to be pronounced one way, but you're pronouncing it in a different way that really just doesn't work at all. So, I've heard people want to say the word epitome. That's the epitome of whatever. And they'll say epitome because they're sounding it out off paper. Oops. Or like the word rhetorical question. That's right, rhetorical question. But then they see the word rhetoric and they'll say rhetoric because it's the shortened version. It makes sense on some level, but that's not the way it works. So either one of two things. One, choose a different word if possible. Or two, go to places like dictionary.com and make it pronounce it for you and practice that way. All right, number 7, and this is the place where most people have the most struggle. I'll be honest with you. This is nonverbal, but it's also going to be heavily sort of modeled on conversational style. And it's through movement, gestures, posture, and eye contact. So with this, if you are talking to someone in a conversation who you're comfortable around them, but you respect them, you want them to respect you, you're in that middle zone of being appropriately conversational. You don't just freeze up. You have movement. You have gestures. You'll point to things. You'll talk with your hands a little bit, big, small, that kind of stuff. Your posture will be, not uptight and rigid, but you're also not going to be slouched over the entire time. So find that sort of zone and go with it for your speeches. For movement, we're in a little bit of a different situation with online recordings. If we were in a classroom, I would tell you to move and give you different examples of how to move. But for us, hey, just try to make sure that you stay in frame and stand back a little from the camera. Stand, by the way, if possible, back from the camera so that we can see you maybe move a little. Or, also be in control of that movement. Don't sway and, rock back and forth and kick your foot out and that kind of thing. We'll notice that. And it can be distracting. That doesn't mean you have to stand 100% still. Please don't. But on your main points, when you shift from one to the next, you can reposition your body, but stay there for that point, and then reposition again. As an example, gestures, big thing here. Make sure we can see them. Uh, have them, but also make sure that they're in the frame, which can be a little challenging. I know sometimes you'll just see like the top of my hands go by. But if again you're doing it, but you're doing it here, and I can see that you're trying, that's great. But I can't make them out. An easy thing to do would just be to like my first thing, second thing, third thing. I've been trying to do that in this video. Uh, think about if you were explaining to someone how to get from where you are right now watching this to the nearest bathroom. It's going to be different for all of us, but it's going to be easier with our hands. We're going to say things like, okay, yeah, just go right out the door and then, take a right, go down that hallway, and then as soon as you come to the turn right there, it'll be right on your left. If you did that without it, we'd be probably moving our head around, trying to signal the directions. And, we do it all the time. We gesture all the time. So just make sure that you don't lose it while you're up here and that it stays visible in the film. Posture, again, find the middle ground. We've talked about that. And then last here, eye contact, adequate eye contact, so important. You have to make eye contact as a speaker. It's just one of those things you got to do. It's vital. It communicates honesty. It communicates attention and attraction in our culture. So have it. That does not mean that you need to that you need to memorize your speech. You can use your notes. I want you to use your notes, but do it effectively. Try to, at the minimum, have 50% of your time on camera looking at the camera so that we have that sense of eye contact. Look down at notes, of course, and then come right back up. If you're reading something because it's a direct quotation or something you don't want to get wrong, read it word for word. Look down the whole time. That's fine. But generally speaking, find an effective way to bounce back and forth. The mistake I see a lot it looks weird in person or on camera is people will look down and read a line and then silently make the eye contact. Like that's the thing to do, right? They'll be like, in our culture, we understand that eye contact is important. Also, we should understand, and then that doesn't work. That doesn't work. So try to practice that. I mean, really, you need to be very familiar with your material so that you don't rely on notes as a crutch. But that doesn't mean, again, that you need to memorize this. Balance it out. Number 8 is simply for this speech, time. Were you in the time limit? As I mentioned before, there's 30-second penalties for each. There's 1 point penalties on the raw score for each 30 seconds you're over or under. And if you get out of the range, then I'll just stop you in the middle or wherever you are in the speech and we'll start clapping for you. If we were in a live class, but since we're on a recording, I'll just stop it there. And then whatever you didn't get to won't get graded. With this setup, though, with an online speech where you get to record and review, there's no excuse not to be in the time limit. If you run through it and you see, oh man, it wasn't too bad, but I was not in that zone of time, do it again, right? You've got time. Start early. Later, when the PowerPoint is part of this will also be where the PowerPoint gets evaluated and your use of it gets evaluated. So again, what I will do, count up your points, give you a total out of 32, do that total divided by 32. That'll give me a percentage. And then I will multiply that by 0.15 for the first speech. So that's 15% of your grade. And then I'll get your grade out of 15 points. And that's what we're looking for. Now, some of the things that I talked about today with your delivery, you're going to see those down here in chapter 8. And there's the eye contact, there's the movement, gestures, and all that. So what I want to make clear is as you watch this video and you may be thinking, well, where is that information? It's actually after this. And if I can get it to go up, if we go back up to the schedule, you'll see that we're going to do informative verbal, nonverbal delivery next week. And so the idea there is that I will give you an example. I'll start with a blank outline next week. and I will go from nothing to completed in less than an hour so that you can see that it can be done. I'll also post either this week or next week. I may move it and do it this week, but it doesn't matter to you. I will do a video on that informative verbal and nonverbal delivery so that you can make more sense of that evaluation form in those nonverbal and verbal elements we just discussed. So be sure to tune back in for that. But the big takeaways from the day: one, you have a class outline that you're required to use, not some other version. Use this one. Second, when you use it, don't feel like you need to add things to it or take things out. Use it as it is, and I promise, and I'll show you this next week, I promise I will. It will flow pretty well and it'll sound nice and complete. Third, look at everything on that outline and understand how it works, and then look at the evaluation form with that, and you'll see that you're being graded on exactly what you're being asked to fulfill in that outline for at least half the evaluation form. So that should be some good point getting opportunities. And then last but not least, when you practice, go ahead and use this evaluation form to sort of gauge your performance. What would you mark if you were using this? And that's a good starting place for you as you practice. So that's it for week 4. I hope this was useful in terms of the outline and the evaluation form. Soon I will do the other video on delivery, and then, of course, the outline demonstration. Don't forget, for this week, what is due, week 4 is your topic and sources presentation, and I guess the video and the paper. You'll see that worksheet. That's what's the paper part. And your first speech lab visit for the tour is due by Friday of this week. And we close Fridays at 1 p.m. So make sure you get that stuff done. If you have questions, as always, let me know, and I will be happy to help. And I will see you next time.